Everything you know about falling in love is brand new. Not new like last century, new like last Tuesday, relative to how long humans have been doing this. The flowers, the rings, the ceremony, the vows, all of it is a thin layer of culture, painted over something far older, far stranger, and far less romantic than you've been led to believe. Before any of that existed, humans were still pairing up, still choosing someone, still staying, and the reasons they did it would be almost unrecognizable to you today. This is what happened before weddings.
Here's the assumption most people carry without realizing it, that love came first and marriage was built around it. That's almost certainly backwards. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, roughly 95% of the time our species has existed, there were no ceremonies, no contracts, no officiants, and no legal frameworks of any kind. There was just a group of between 20 and 150 people moving across a landscape, trying not to die. In that world, pairing up wasn't a romantic decision. It was a survival calculation, and not even a conscious one. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies, the closest living window we have into how early humans operated, consistently find that pair bonding in these groups is driven by three forces that have almost nothing to do with romance: resource access, offspring protection, and coalition value. You paired with someone because together you were harder to kill, because your children were more likely to survive, because your social position in the group became more stable, because two people sharing labor, knowledge, and shelter outlasted one person doing it alone. Love, if it existed at all in the way you understand it, came later. Or it came sideways. It wasn't the engine. It was what sometimes grew inside the machine after it had already been running for a while. So what did it actually look like? The fossil and behavioral record gives us a fragmented picture, but the fragments are consistent enough to draw from. Early human pair bonds, emerging somewhere around 1.9 to 2 million years ago with Homo erectus, appear to have developed alongside a major shift in how our ancestors provisioned food. Males began bringing resources back to a specific female and her offspring, not to the group at large, to one. That's a significant behavioral shift, and it left traces in our anatomy. Human males are larger than females, but not by much, a ratio that in primates tends to correlate with moderate, not extreme competition for mates. We weren't built for a purely competitive free-for-all. We were built for something closer to sustained partnership. Around the same period, female mate selectivity sharpened. The energetic cost of human pregnancy and infant dependency is extraordinary compared to other primates. A human infant is completely helpless for years. A human pregnancy is physically grueling and dangerous. That cost shaped female choice toward partners who would stay, who would provide, who could be relied upon across seasons. Not just the strongest male in the group, the most dependable one. But here's where it gets more complicated. In hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, groups like the Kung of southern Africa, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Agta of the Philippines, pair bonding rarely operates in isolation. The group is always involved. Kin networks played a central role in who paired with whom. Older relatives, particularly maternal kin, held significant influence over mate selection. In many observed societies, young people had some input, but the pairing was never purely personal. It was a group resource decision. This person's labor, their foraging skill, their genetic health, their social alliances, all of it was being absorbed into your network. That mattered to everyone in the group, not just the two people involved. There were no ceremonies in the Western sense, but there were rituals, shared meals, gift exchanges between families, public acknowledgement within the group, a period of cohabitation that signaled the bond to others. The function was identical to a modern wedding, making the bond visible, making it social, giving the community a stake in its survival and its continuation. And when the bond broke, as it did regularly, since pair bonds and hunter-gatherer societies dissolved far more easily than modern marriages, the group absorbed that disruption too. Dissolution was common. Serial monogamy was common. Remarriage was common. The romantic ideal of one permanent partner, chosen freely and kept for life, was not the operating norm. It was barely even an aspiration. So far, this sounds coldly strategic, calculated, almost transactional, like early humans were running spreadsheets instead of feeling anything. And that would be a clean answer, satisfying even. Humans paired up for survival. Love was a later invention, layered on top by poets and priests. Case closed. But the evidence doesn't support that either. What anthropologists and evolutionary psychologists keep finding across cultures and across the fossil record is that the emotional architecture of attachment is ancient, genuinely ancient, older than language, possibly older than our species in its current form. The neurobiology of pair bonding, the oxytocin and vasopressin systems that drive attachment, jealousy, and grief at separation, these aren't cultural inventions. They're biological infrastructure, hardwired, and they show up in species far older than us. Prairie voles bond for life and show measurable distress when separated from their partner. Certain bird species display what can only be described as mourning when a bond is broken. The chemistry of attachment predates Homo sapiens by millions of years. Which means early humans didn't pair up strategically and feel nothing. They paired up strategically and felt everything. The grief was real. The jealousy was real. The specific pull toward one particular person, the discomfort of their absence, the way the bond felt different from every other social connection, all of it was real. It just wasn't called love. It wasn't organized around the individual's emotional fulfillment, and it certainly wasn't treated as the central purpose of a human life. That's the part that should sit with you. The emotion is ancient. The idea that the emotion is the point, that you deserve to feel it, that it should guide your most important choices, that framing is extraordinarily new. A few hundred years old at most. In some cultures around the world today, it's still not the dominant framework.
Modern weddings inherited almost none of the mechanics of early human pair bonding. The group involvement, the practical survival calculus, the easy dissolution when the bond stopped working, the kin network authority over who you chose, most of that is gone, or so heavily diluted it's barely visible. What modern weddings kept, without knowing it, is the performance, the public declaration, the ritual that makes the bond visible to the people around you and gives them a role in witnessing it. That part is ancient. That part your earliest ancestors would recognize immediately. What they wouldn't recognize is the idea that you chose this person freely, that your feelings were the primary and sufficient reason, that the two of you are the center of the decision, not your families, not your group, not your collective survival. For most of human history, you were never the center of that decision. The group was, the species was. And somewhere in the distance between that world and this one, something shifted. The individual moved to the center. The emotion became the justification. The ceremony stopped being a practical social contract and became a celebration of feeling. Whether that shift moved us toward something truer or away from something we quietly needed, nobody has answered that cleanly yet. Maybe that's why weddings still make people cry. Not just from joy, from something older than joy. Something the body remembers, even when the mind has moved on. Something that doesn't quite have a name anymore.